Docs and a Grunt. As usual, I am Dr. Luis E. Fonseca, U.S. Navy Hospital Corpsman, retired after 22 years of active duty in the U.S. Navy. During my tenure in the Navy, I was engaged in the Battle of Al Nazaré on March 23rd of 2003. Due to my actions on that day, I was awarded the Navy Cross. As usual, please always remember that although Dr. Barry is our host on here and a dual certified board psychologist and psychoanalyst, he is not here to provide any sort of treatment, diagnosis, or anything like that. If anything comes up during the this if tonight, I'm tongue tied today, everyone. If anything comes up this evening that might trigger you, please, we encourage you to call your uh, your PCM and or your mental health team. And with that, because I am having issues talking, I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Nate.
Hey, I'm Nate Emery. I'm your grunt for the show. I served 33 years for Department of Defense. 22 years of that was with the Marine Corps. 12 years of it was enlisted. And my combat tours were in Operation Desert Storm and in Mogadishu, Somalia. And tonight, our guest on Two Docs and a Grunt is Dr. Maria Mollenhauer. She served from 2012 to 2016. Um, After she had got her degree, very interesting here, after she got her degree in music, she then enlisted in the Marine Corps to become a musician and then ended up becoming a supply logistics Marine. And she served with Marine Aircraft Group 26 at Marine Corps Air Station New River in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And while she was on active duty, she taught lessons and played in community groups in the Jacksonville and Cherry Point areas. And while she was on active duty, she suffered traumatic brain injury. And then after she finished her time in the Marine Corps, she returned to North Dakota, um, got her master's degree in counseling, and continued to develop her interest in understanding how individuals are impacted by significant change and post-military growth. This path eventually led her to pursue a PhD in industrial and organized psychology. Maria's research focuses on the military and veteran community with a deep focus on experiences of women veterans, which led her to develop theory that puts the individual back into military service transition and reintegration processes. She remains actively involved in the veteran community through nonprofit behavioral health and peer support while expanding her work in research and higher education. And something I love is she gave us a thought to begin with in here. I don't know if it was your intent, but I love the statement. Is that when we lose the individual voice of the service member or veteran, we lose the human connection to military service, transition, and integration. Their stories matter, and it's important that we continue to listen. And then with that, we'll give you Doc Barry, and then he will uh, explain how we got Dr. Mollenhauer on here tonight and begin the questions and getting to know her. All right, go ahead, Doc.
Hi, folks. I'm Andrew Barry. I'm also known as Doc Barry. I am a psychologist and psychoanalyst and APA fellow. I specialize in working with veterans and first responders of all denominations battling with post traumatic stress disorder and related mental health stuff. I'm in private practice in Schenectady, New York. And right, the last, now there's three of us who can't talk tonight. Terrific. There must be something in the water. All right. At the APA convention a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, whatever, at the fellows pinning ceremony, I was very, very fortunate to meet Maria. And I say fortunate in not the generic sense. It's just meeting a colleague and so on and so forth, just somebody you click with. And
Mhm.
she and I started comparing notes about what we think is important as far as where the field is going and where the field should go. And by the way, Maria, I'm going to put you on the spot. She
Go
is
ahead.
actively considering rushing right back out and buying another doctoral degree in clinical psychology. So there's enough masochism in this group. My God, this is just wonderful. But in any case, her work, her training is industrial organizational psych, and from what I understand, that's not my field. It tends to lean more toward research.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was speaking with Maria, I felt instantly comfortable enough, and I thought we have a clinician in the making here, to open up about my misgivings, my weaknesses, if you will, about research. All right. Number one, it's not my thing. I Pounding on a PC just doesn't do it. Reading the stuff up and writing it up and running experiments, I had enough of that during grad school, part one and part two. To me, and you guys already know this too, the alpha and the omega of my existence is in my consulting room on the front lines, metaphorically speaking, trying to take a piano off the backs of a lot of very, very traumatized people, right? So I felt free enough with Maria to say, I don't understand research. Well, that's a hell of a thing for a guy who holds two doctorates to admit, but it's true. I start reading this stuff, and it's like it is chock a block with jargon,
Mm-hmm.
phrases, psychobabble, and it's dehumanizing. And
Yeah.
don't get me started on the sickening term evidence-based medicine. Every time I hear that, I want to reach for a couple of gallons of kaopectate. Now, I
Oh.
shared this rather graphically as I am right now with Maria, and she was on board. She gets it, and I'm going to turn you loose on this one. Um, this stuff can be so dry and so
Mm-hmm.
removed from the human beings we are supposed to be studying. And she told me again, I'm going to very warmly put you on the spot. You said that's the kind of research that you refuse to do. You told me, at least I think I heard you say, you
Mm-hmm.
told me it has to contain the human element. Otherwise, what the hell are we doing here? I was like,
Yeah.
this is somebody I can work with. And Luis is interested in doing research. So I was doubly grateful because what he's going to learn from me about research can be written on a grain of sand in the middle of an F5 tornado. It ain't going to last. However, your stuff is all new, as is
Mm-hmm.
because he's just getting into it. So you guys share contact information after this.
Yeah.
Marie is clearly the one you want to go to, not this nasty old man. So anyway, it is my it's my job to come up with a thought-provoking idea or question, um, to get the ball rolling. So, Maria, why don't you take it right from where I left off about research,
Sure.
what it should be, but also what led you to psychology, as much of your own experience of battling a TBI as you're
Yeah.
comfortable. The floor is open. The floor is yours, sister. Carry on.
Well, thank you, brother. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with all you here today. You know, it was, like we talked about when we were in DC, it's like you meet the person at the right time. And like being at the fellow pinning at APA, it was just, we clicked like that after, you talked part about your story and I talked about part of mine. And like I said then, and I'll say it now, I do consider you a Marine, whether paper or other things say otherwise. And you are a Marine to me, and I need your address because I have something that I'm going to send to you. It's one of my Eagle Globe and anchors that I got, that I ended up getting two when I right after I got through boot camp, one from a good friend of mine and another one, well, my one at the EGA ceremony. And you deserve it, because I've been trying to figure out who I want to pass it on to. And after getting to hear more about you, you're I know who it needs to go to.
You've just produced somebody with the traditional Harvard mouth to speechlessness and silence and tears. I, good God. All right. Okay. I was not expecting that tonight. Well, it's a rare occasion, Maria, but you're here to witness it. I don't know what to say other than my heart is full. God bless you.
Well, Well, you're welcome. That's, I've been holding on to my one for quite a while and trying to figure out like who's it going to go to because, you're all military, we're all about passing things on to the next person because we're only going to be in a role for so long. And, you know, it's that instead of like passing a coin, I want to give you something that you didn't get at the time and that I've had on for, since 2012. It needs to go to another home because I got plenty. And I feel like you deserve one from a Marine who, from one Marine to another. So it's all for, all for you.
Thank you.
So
You
like with
know,
all,
Just wow.
okay,
I'm sorry, I want to jump in on this. I normally
Sure.
wouldn't do this, but so Doc Barry, I don't know if you're aware, there's a website for the National Military Monument in Washington, D.C. Do you know about that?
Yes,
Mhm.
41 million served or something like that.
Yeah. You know your name's in there, right? You search your name in there, you pop up.
My heart
There.
just fell up my asshole.
Yeah,
Oh
I've told
my
you
God.
before,
My
man. I
heart
said
just,
you
oh
have an
wow.
honorable discharge.
This is supposed to be for Marie, and I'm the identified patient tonight.
Well, she provided the perfect segue. I was like, let's
Yeah.
reinforce this thing, right? Okay, that's all I had to say, though. now we can have the awkward silence where we don't know what to say.
That's impossible to follow up with. Now you guys are gonna. Oh man. Now I'm not gonna sleep tonight. God bless you guys.
Well,
All right, Maria.
let me
all I can say to that is Semper Fidelis.
Right.
Rough.
Let me do a follow on question with that then, since we're talking about the Eagle Globe and Anchor and boot camp and
Sure.
whatnot. So, Doc, what transition happens that you went to become a musician and that didn't work out and ended up being a
Sure.
logistics Marine?
So I'll actually start it back to like what actually got me into the Marine Corps in the first place, because a little about me is like I started playing trumpet back in 5th grade, and that was kind of like my thing, and it led me all the way through going into college because I wanted to be a musician, professional musician. And during that pathway, when I was about 11, 12 years old, I went to a music camp that's on the border of North Dakota and Manitoba called the International Music Camp. And one instructor there, his name, at the time he was a staff sergeant, but his name is Mitch Martin. He retired as a master sergeant. And he was one of the first trumpet instructors that had I'll say it now, like a different swagger or a different energy, just a different way about him. And that just, it piqued my interest at the time, but I didn't know what it was going to be like after as I kind of got more experience. And throughout the years, it's like he was at camp and I went there year after year. And it was just, he was so different from every instructor that I was like, I think he's cool. And then I didn't think about the military at the time, but it was just the way he approached life was very different compared to my, after I got into college. It was like, like typical academics who are just, kind of just go about the academic structure. And after I got onto staff at the camp, he got me into the thing is like, what are you thinking about doing after you go get out with your music degree? I was like, well, I'm thinking about going on into grad school for either music performance or musicology. And he's like, have you thought about getting life experience in a different way? Because, a lot of times, you don't see the whole of life when you're in like an academic setting all the time and you're just going about the ways. Because at that time, I was a poor broke college student just trying to survive and working 40 hours a week, and also just like getting into just just trying to make it through. And I went back to my apartment one night and I was like, I've it just got me thinking about it in a different way. I was like, is this even possible? And I just, one day I went to the recruiter that was in my college town and I was like, could you tell me more about what being like a Marine Corps musician could be like? And that kind of just started that whole path of changing my trajectory because I had to get into shape. I ended up losing after I got sold on, like, oh, I can carry on and be a musician in the Marine Corps. I was like, I went down that path of getting into shape, losing about what, 140 pounds, something like that. Going from not being able to run a single lap around the field in high school to being able to run 10, 15 miles without any issue. So that was a transformative component on its own. And throughout those processes, I ended up getting, passing my audition and getting a contract to be a musician in the Marine Corps. And of course, after I graduated, it was, going into boot camp. I didn't want to become an officer because I just want to be a musician. That's, I thought I was just going to do my 4 years and be done with that and kind of go on to other things. So it's like I went into boot camp about 6 weeks after I graduated from college. And mind you, I was still working full time. I was playing full time. At that moment, I didn't know what like feeling burnt out could be. And as I got into boot camp, you've all been knowing what that's like. You get torn down from like what you were and they're, building up into something new. And during that time, one of the things is like I didn't qualify the first time on the range just because it was, there's just a lot going on, just trying to make it through and, make it look like I'm turning into a Marine, even though like I was just trying to get through to go to the school of music. So I ended up being on Paris Island for 18 weeks instead of, the typical 13. And by that point, I had ended up not making it. Well, it was during the Crucible, we were doing the O course and I didn't stick a landing on one of the last obstacles where you had a chicken wing over. And I ended up landing on like the outer edge of like one of the bunkers that with all the wood, and I ended up being a bad infection as a result. And I covered that up the whole time. And then by that point, like when you finish something big, like you feel very full of yourself. You're very, with it. And it's like probably cocky too. Yeah, I was. And I was just like, I'm like, hey, I made it when other people didn't think I would. And then going on to MCT or Marine Combat Training, during that entire time, my leg hadn't healed, and I did not want to be at Camp Geiger any more than I had to, because that was 29 days of like having to literally hurry up and wait. Literally that entire freaking 29 days, I kid you not. And like throughout that time, I knew there was something going on with my leg and it was turning into cellulitis. And I made it through, but it was just during that time, like I didn't go to medical because I didn't want to spend any extra time than I had to. But by the time I got to the School of Music in Virginia Beach, I had a full blown infection. And between that, after going through all the extra training, it was like I was starting to slow down and I didn't know what that was like at the time, like what burnout would look like. And it was like, by the time I had gotten there, like my ability to play wasn't where it usually was at because I was performing on the national and international levels because I went with a group to Australia back in 2011 to do a prelude for the International Trumpet Guild Conference in Sydney. And like I felt really good and confident, but at that point I wasn't able to play some of my typical articulations, scales, bugle calls. Like I wasn't keeping up and I didn't know what it was. And for me, like seeing my ability to go down, it sucked. It really sucked. And when you kind of go to that point, it's like, I'm not sure what this is and what all this may be. And it's like, I had passed everything else in the School of Music at that point. But going to the last playing audition, it was like you had to do like a solo, bugle calls, scales, and like some, just something, just kind of like a blind piece that you would play. At that point, I didn't pass because I didn't know what was going on. I felt overwhelmed. And at that point, I wanted to like give up because I didn't make it. And it was difficult because I didn't pass by 0.03 because I was supposed to go to second division on Lejeune, which was right down in the same area where I ended up being. But at that point, I was devastated because being a musician, what I thought was going to be my whole identity and just what I wanted to be, and having that like stripped away after going through all the shit,
Right.
yeah, shit that I did, I was like, like I'm thinking it's like, what in the heck am I else supposed to do? Because I didn't want to be stuck doing some crappy job because, after you don't make it through that kind of contract, you're kind of up to the needs of the Marine Corps.
Right.
And I ended up getting like reclassed to do supply and logistics. And, and then I ended up going to, going back to Camp Geiger or Camp Johnson because everything is all around there. And then at that point, oh gosh, freaking Camp Johnson.
I was there
That
for
is
field medical service school. Well, it's called
oh
FMTB
oh
now, so yeah, I know.
oh yeah. I remember that because the blue and green side corpsmen were having to
Mhm,
go through the training right over there. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
mhm.
But it's like after having to get through that, I got through that just fine. And then I ended up getting stationed on New River. And at that point, it was like I was having to like redefine who I was. It's like, okay, and like going through all of those elements and just trying to think like, who am I going to be now after I didn't get to be what I wanted to be, which was a musician? Because I had, I was making good friendships with the musicians, and little did I know that I was still going to continue them, even though it wasn't my typical MOS. But that that was how like starting as a musician and ending up doing supply and logistics, that ended up being like kind of like the defining catalyst of who I was going to be for the next few years. But that also allowed me to meet new people that I probably never would have if I would have, ended up just, sticking as a musician side. I ended up being on the air wing, so I got to work with a lot of officers and just became being responsible for multi-million dollar accounts and just trying to survive life. And honestly, those moments were hard because it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was like, trying to make the best of the situation. And at that point, this would be about going into 2014, and this kind of leads up into how I got my TBI. And like I was on New River for about, let's see, that had been about 7-8 months, and they were tasked like, hey, there's this pre-deployment coming up. We're wanting to get, like, and you got selected to go do this. And I was like, okay, so I was making the best of the situation, and we went all around from North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, just being role players in different simulations because when you're getting ready for deployment, you're going to encounter pretty much anything and anything. And during those periods, I was just going along with it. Got to meet other people, and it was all right. Then we were on our last few days. We were told we were doing a mock village simulation, and we were getting ready to. We got the order to tear everything down, and at that moment, we were like the people I were with. We were staying in those 20-person base X tents, and at that point, after getting the go ahead, we tore down like all the steel frame of it. And then there were 7 of us who were getting ready to like load all the canvas. And you know how like when you fold something, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And by the
Right.
time we had all that canvas rolled up, it was somewhere between 300 and 400 pounds. And so we were taking it to the back of the box truck, and we were pretty much right there. And my back was turned, and I had been told that we are going to give some kind of signal like, hey, like we're going to toss this, we need you to move. And, but there was no signal, and it had been tossed. So I ended up getting nailed in the back of my head, neck, and shoulders with over 300 pounds of freaking tent. And, just boom, straight to the ground. And through that I ended up getting knocked out. I don't remember for how long, but I had told Andrew about this. I was like, the first thing I remembered and saying, I was like, "Are you trying to fucking kill me?" And little after that, did I know that that was going to completely change the direction of everything. And at that point, everything did change. And throughout those moments, I was learning. I didn't know at that moment, like I was going to have to, stand on my own, like fend for myself. Because after that, I wasn't able to do my job fully doing supply. because I was doing a lot for a lot of the squadrons on the base, and I couldn't keep up because I was going to appointments left and right. And during those times, I was being told, like, hey, you might be you might be a malingerer or faking it, and that like that broke me. That absolutely broke me because being 2,000 miles away from my family and just having to try and navigate all of this, and hearing my close friends back home and my family just hearing my pain, like physical and emotional, because during that period I had to like hide all my emotions and just bury them away, because I was just trying to make it through and understand like what a TBI was like and what else also changed, because after that I ended up having a lot of neurological changes that I wasn't anticipating. And during that time, it was like, here's this medication, try this, do this therapy, try this, because we don't know how to treat you, right? And during that whole period, it was miserable, absolutely miserable, and I fucking hated it. And I had told, and I've been told a lot of people this, well, and I've been speaking about it more now, when all that shit was going on, because of like the physical, emotional pain and everything that I was hearing, the only reason I knew I was alive because I was in pain. And nobody should have to say something like that. And when I what I know now after experiencing that is that I had to figure out how to survive, because I had my family and like friends back here in North Dakota thinking, I was like, we want you and we care about who you are. And because there's one point where I had ended up going to an appointment, and because I was in a lot of pain and I couldn't physically move because of my neurological conditions, that
Mhm.
I just needed somebody to come and get me, because I had been told if you had something going on, they're like, hey, call us and we'll come and get you. Nobody was picking up. And I mean, no one, nobody in my shop, like the command numbers I had, nobody was picking up. So I called my parents. And honestly, it was because of them, and that saved me. And finally, after talking to my parents, they actually ended up calling my command because I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And then it was after their phone call, I started getting bombarded with phone calls like, hey, where are you at? What's going on? I'm thinking like, why didn't this happen the first time when I was calling you guys?
Right.
And after we got back, they're like, why did your family call the command? Blah, 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 blah. I was like, because I had nobody else to talk to. And I just needed somebody who would answer. And it was the whole thing like, it was in my shop. They're like, we're your family. I'm like, no, you're not. And I thought I would never have to say that, because, it's preached to us that, like, after you get into the military, it becomes like another family. And before all that happened, I thought it was being like that, but it
Mhm.
wasn't. And it was unfortunate, because it's like, I knew then I had to protect myself. And I was never a mean person or any of that. I was always respectful and everything else. And, but that made me learn that I had to be very selective with who I told anything to. And that basically went on for the rest of my time in, because people spoke behind my back, and they would always tell me like, oh, hey, you can go and you should do this and this. I'm like, I can't, because my paperwork and stuff says I physically can't. And I'm like, I'm just trying to survive this to get out. And throughout all of that, I was miserable, and just trying to hide everything that I was, and I didn't know who I was being. I was just trying to survive. And when you're at those points, you fundamentally change in different ways. And at that time and place, I didn't know what it was like to navigate life after TBI or neurological changes, because I wasn't getting the appointments that I needed. because with where I was at, I was having to make my own appointments. And you'd think after somebody gets a TBI, they should have been moved to like Wounded Warrior Battalion or things like that, which I wasn't.
Absolutely.
Which I wasn't. I I should have. They had told me that like, oh, we're going to move you to over there before while you're on limited duty. It never happened. And I was stuck by myself trying to figure out these appointments and going to ones that I didn't necessarily need to. And that was draining. It was emotionally taxing. And just having to navigate all this, all the shit. Literally, that's the best way to call it. This fucking shit. And it was so difficult that I didn't know what to latch onto. And I, after like 6 months of limited duty, I ended up getting put onto med board. And at that point, I was exhausted. And even though like, I had mentioned that one, like feeling so dark that I only knew I was alive because I was in pain, that was happening all the time. And I didn't know what to latch onto because I knew I couldn't trust anybody. And that's unfortunate because you feel like you should have somebody who you're able to just confide in a little bit. I had no one. And
Right.
when you're at that point where you're like fundamentally like cut off from those who you think you could trust and those you know you can trust that are like 2,000 miles away, you're in a point of like, do I want to go on or do I not? But I knew I wanted to. Of course I wanted to go on, but it was just like, what do I latch onto? What is something that's going to give me some little inkling that I can control? Given that parts of my health were completely out of control at then, thankfully now they are. And it was at that point, my parents were always telling me, they're like, try to find something, like we'll even try to help you give different ideas. Thankfully, like they're sending me care packages all the time and just, doing what they could, being so far from home. And one day I was just searching online and I saw like one of my alma maters is University of North Dakota. And I saw that like I could start another degree online. When I saw that, I was like, I'm like, can I actually do this? And I talked to my parents about it. They're like, we think you should do it because you need something. Because, yeah, there's a couple of people you can talk to, but they're like, with what you're going through, you need to have something that you can latch onto and just control. Because, they're like, it's going to be a while before you come home. And my med board took about 9 months. And that there's a whole nother side to that story. But just lightly after I saw that, it was simple. All I had to do was go and call the university, like re-enroll because I was already an alumni. And it was within like 2 days, I had gotten enrolled into psychology courses because that was the one degree I saw online. And it gave me something different. Well, it gave me something that I needed, something that I could just have a little bit of stable point. And this kind of comes up into my research where I talk about where like if you have something stable or even if it's something small, it can help you navigate some of the deepest, darkest stuff that you're going through. And for me, the key is like, typically you would want to go through like using tuition assistance in your command. But I personally didn't because I know it's like if you're not meeting certain things, they're not going to approve your TA.
Correct.
So what I ended up doing is like I started using the GI Bill because I was still in, and it freaking saved my life. I can tell you that because it gave me something to latch onto, and it just took my focus off like what my reality was into something that I could just use my mind for something different instead of just thinking like I'm in pain. I don't know what I should say or what I should do, to like, oh, I can actually look at something and understand is like, what is this what part of Freud's concepts make sense in this XYZ area? Or like I had to learn a language and the only one that they offered online was Norwegian. And and being from North Dakota, it's like the yep, you betcha kind of mentality. But at that point, when I was able to start that, I had been moved from my my supply shop into our command where we're like in the logistics shop. So I was doing facilities and logistics. And my major, he had seen a thing where like I could actually be external to Wounded Warrior Battalion on Lejeune. And he was like, I think you should go to this class because it might do something for you. He was one of the few people that actually like judged me for just who I am rather than what I could or could not do. And I'm thankful for that because of going to that class, I finally I got connected with some of their care coordinators, and also one of the people that helped me a lot was one of their chaplain that I could just talk and not be judged because everything that said in there stays in there. Minus like if of course if you're harm to yourself or others, XYZ.
Right.
But that allowed me to just find some other people who weren't going to say like, oh, you're not capable of doing your job or you're not capable of being a Marine, which honestly was the breath of fresh air that I needed because at that point I had nobody that besides my family that were listening to me. And honestly, like even to this day, my family and close friends here have been a blessing. And like meeting people at the right time, like Andrew, it's just it changes you in a different direction. And like going back to the psychology part, because of like being external to Wounded Warrior, they had a thing at the Naval Hospital where like as a student you could be like going to like look at different like some of the health careers that people might take on. Like you could go into the lab or do simulation stuff, or like for me, I was interested in the mental health clinic because it wasn't I had limitations of what I could do physically. I was like, I'm gonna go check this out. And because of that, I ended up meeting another person who changed me. It was like his name was Kevin Kesterson. He was the former command master chief of the Naval Hospital on Lejeune.
I know
He's
him.
yeah, he's still there to this day. Yeah, such an unbelievably empathetic and understanding guy.
One of
And
the best Master Chiefs I've known in
oh
my
yeah,
Navy career.
I couldn't agree more. And just allowed me to feel more human despite going through stuff. And he even helped me get other medical appointments that I needed that I couldn't get on my own. And that helped me through so much of this. I'm just gonna say it was all shit.
Yeah, yeah.
But after I gotten through like to kind of keep moving it forward, having those little bits of focus just helped me get my mind off of all the crap that was going on because my med board had just drug and drug and drug on. And at that point, I was like, I need something to change because I know like I was going to get medically separated. And
Mhm.
then I ended up, it was like 7 months later, and I'm saying a thing like, oh, we only want to give you separations pay instead of medical retirement. And everybody was like, you need to push this for medical retirement because you're going to have stuff that is going to carry with you for years to come. And at that point, I was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I don't know if I want to just deal with the bullshit and the monotony. And it was between Kevin and the retired friend, Master Sergeant Midge, and also my two of my uncles were one was a Vietnam service veteran in the Army, and the other one had served in the Navy during that time. And between talking to them, they're like, Maria, you're gonna regret it if you don't go for a formal board. And they were absolutely right. I would have regretted it. So I ended up going through it. It was like a few weeks later, I ended up going to Navy Yard up in DC, like going through a formal hearing. And it was like 2 days later after I got back from DC, I ended up getting medically retired while getting the papers to get medically retired. And honestly, I couldn't have been more relieved. But also during that time, I had a couple of family emergencies where my grandfather was passing away. he had end stage kidney disease, and that was hard because he had also served. He was in the Air Force, and he was one of those people that he was one of I had never seen him cry in my life until I had graduated. Well, graduated high school, graduated college the first time, and then after he found out that I was going to come to Minnesota and say goodbye to him, because I was like, I'm not going to let you go just over a phone call. I was like, that's bullshit. I'm going to come and see you. And between all those moments, just those human, authentic experiences is what helped me get through stuff. And, going through all the difficulties of, going through DC, dealing with all the ups and downs and just the stupid stuff that could go on day to day, they helped me make that shift from like, shit sucks to be like, hey, we're here for you. And like, you'd be stupid to not call us because we're going to bug you anyways. And help me get back to North Dakota and to my family. And it was through all those interactions and experiences that's basically led me onto my path now of wanting to understand like how people interact in their environments. And going back to what you said, Andrea, earlier about putting, like, a lot of information in jargon, it's devoid of like the actual human experience of what individuals are going through. And that was my whole research was how do I put the human aspect back into what it looks like to go through military service as a woman? Because when I got out, there's no guidebook. There was nobody saying it's okay to feel all the stuff that I was feeling. And that was my goal, was just to see if there was something that I could build that could basically say at the end of the day, it's okay to feel human throughout these different experiences and processes, because there are a lot of times we're not told that it's okay to feel that or just experience that because we're used to one certain way of thinking. And that was what inspired my research, because I couldn't find anything and I was interested in motivation. Like what was it that helped you get through something? Because for me, it ended up being starting education again and my family. And if you have those one little things, I wanted to understand, like, is there a pattern to like when we first join to when we go through and when we make some kind of transition or we get out, where those values kind of come back and we can understand those human elements. And our experiences are completely influential to how we see the world, see our world and our perspective. And I was able to do that. And that was my whole part of my research, was to put the human aspect back into it. And like, yeah, there's some big jargon words in my research. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of it all, it I put the human part back into it because there's so much about it that people haven't spent enough time understanding. And actually that's what inspires me now, is to understand those bits and pieces, because some people have either been haven't wanted to take the time to, or they weren't sure how to do it. And did I know what I was doing when I first started that research? Oh, heck no. I knew I wanted to understand something, because we I was just inspired by my own experiences, and I wanted to give back for those who had helped me get through what I've gone through. And I was able to do that. And thankfully with my dissertation chair he's a veteran too. His name is Dr. Joseph Troiani. He's the head of Adler's military psychology program, and been my advisor for over 2 years. But and he encouraged me to literally swing for the fences to understand the human component of what motivation looks like when you first are interested in the military to when you're integrating certain aspects of yourself back into how you're viewing yourself after a period of time. And I was able to be able to capture that in a way that, like I said, it puts that human element back into like different transition or reintegration patterns. And that I've taken those philosophies from what I've learned from everybody into how I view my own world, and trying to do those in different ways so that I can, see if other people are interested, and if that kind of shifts or like challenges their perspective to something that they're already on. But I can tell you, if it hadn't been for the people that I've interacted with or I've met, I wouldn't be here today. And I can honestly say that with all my heart, my soul, is that like if I hadn't gone through what I've gone through, or not hadn't met the people who I met, I don't know which direction what I would have gone in. Also, I wouldn't know if I would have been here today. So it's like that's why those human experiences matter, because we don't know how it's going to shape and influence us. And just like with me
Yeah.
meeting Andrew in DC, it was like it was meant to be.
Maria, if I may interject real quick,
Yeah.
listening to you talk about your experience, right?
Mhm.
You said something to me, and as someone that's a student right now of trying to get into the clinical psychology world,
Mhm.
I'm learning how to listen more than
Yeah.
what I was trained to do as a corpsman for 22 years, which is fix the problem, right?
Mhm.
One thing I heard you say, which, like I said, to me was very a strong word, was you said when you first joined the Marine Corps, and same with the Navy, but more so, I think the Marine Corps. I can't speak about the Army or Air Force, but I spent most of my career with the Marines as well.
Mhm.
Is we are a family, right? This is a
Yeah.
family. This is a family, and you said, but we're not. To me, it almost kind of sounded like you experienced a little bit of betrayal, right?
Yeah.
You came in with this expectation, and that expectation was like, okay, was given to me until certain people, right, whether it was leadership,
Mhm.
peers, doesn't matter, uh thought that you weren't valued or valuable enough in that organization
Yeah.
anymore. And while you were still in the organization, you saw, I think, what a lot of us see after we transition out, which is
Mhm.
that the Marine Corps and the Navy keeps moving on with or without you.
Yeah.
Almost kind of sounds like that's what you experienced while you were still in uniform.
Oh,
But
absolutely. I, you know, where I was at, it's like, stuff doesn't stop. And it's like, and if you can't get your job done, they're going to find somebody else who can put you. And at those moments, it can be like if you're not accomplishing what you are supposed to do, you're not seen as who you should be. It's like, or the Marine, for me, it was like being seen as the Marine who I should have been. I wanted to be able to do my job, and I wanted to be successful, and being part of that team. And the one thing I'll say is like, yeah, I went in that expectation that it was meant to be family, and there were a lot of like family aspects. But when it, like you said, when it comes to something changing for the individual, that's when it completely shifts. And after my TBI and accident, it completely changed, and it went from like trusting those people that were there to figuring out, I was like, how do I navigate this alone? And like that sense of betrayal, is like that fundamental sense of like that change of your morality, that you know now I understand like what moral injury and everything is. When it combined to my completely went against my own self values, that's when everything changed. And not that I can still, now I can look back at those aspects that felt like family, and they were. But like you said, when you experience some kind of significant change like I did, you know, like that smoke and mirrors was lifted.
yeah,
And I don't, you know, I don't have any negative regard to anybody, but it's like that human aspect that you expect in like a family, when you're no longer able to do certain aspects, it when you're not, it just, like I said, it disappeared.
yeah,
And honestly, that's where like that loneliness, that isolation, that everything, that's where it came from. And having to bury that, just being able to survive literally, was it you know, even to this day, it still hurts just as much then as it does now. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
Let me just throw something in here.
Yeah.
Um, and the word betrayal was used earlier, and that's exactly what this is, what you went through. And since, well, you listened to my story probably too many, these two have listened to it too many times. I know what betrayal is like. Now, I'm going to come at that idea from a different angle. This is
Hmm.
something both Nate and Luis have heard me say a bunch of times. But for me, what I saw, I had never seen before. It was my first time. You can read
Hmm.
about betrayal all day long, but when it comes to you the first time full force,
Yeah.
up your ass without benefit of Vaseline, okay? And Nate and Luis have heard me say this many times over. I don't know if it applies or choose to agree or disagree. And this is from an old. Speaking of music, this is from an old song by Rod Stewart from the '70s. And the title of it is "The First Cut is Always the Deepest,"
Yeah.
and you'll always remember that, the sting of it.
Hmm.
All right, and just like it happened to me 44 years ago, and I know what it's like to be told that I'm disloyal and that I'm a traitor and whatnot. I'm 18 with
Hmm.
a 12-year-old's mind. Been there, done that. You have my sympathies. I can sympathize with that, and it's terrible.
Yeah, it is. And and like you said, it's like after that first time, you still feel all those aspects of what it was like, even though it, like for me, it's only been not even 10, well, yeah, it's been about 11 years, but it it doesn't matter the amount of time. Like you said, that first cut, you're always going to remember what it felt like, how it like affected your environment, yourself, your being. This is just the research I had going on me, so it's like I won't go too far down that rabbit hole. But it's that was one of those moments that, after looking back on like what I've done now, is like why it's so important to have that human element in it. Because if we remove it, we remove a sense of ourselves.
Right.
And that, when we don't have that, we do lose ourselves, and we lose what our value is and like who we are. And I think that's been one of my driving mechanisms throughout, after I got out and as I've gotten back into, literally gotten back into life. Because for me, after, after getting out in 2016, it was like, how do I navigate life with a whole slew of medical stuff that I didn't have before I joined? And I was like, what do I want to do with my life? Because there was, literally the sky was the limit. Except at that time, back in 2016, it was like just trying to like figure it out. And I didn't have the diagnoses that I had. I didn't get those diagnoses until about 2 or 3 years after I got out, because unfortunately I didn't get to the right people who I needed to at the time. But thankfully that there was people in that process who saw me for me rather than who I was supposed to be. And that's why I keep circling back to, is like those certain people, when you meet those people at those right times, that can be defining for how you view yourself, and like for, you know for how many years it may come. And that's like what drives me now for everything that I do.
Maria, you said another powerful word for me specifically, and Doc Barry probably already knows what that word was. You said moral injury.
Hmm.
That is such sorry if you guys hear my little one in the
Oh, you're
background.
good.
um that is, to me, that's such a powerful word. And the reason being
Hmm.
is because I did my capstone project. So my senior project, 47 paper long, on veterans moral injury and veteran suicide the gaps in the
Mm,
DoD and VA prevention system.
yeah.
And I learned that moral injury was only kind of coined in 2009. So we're still on the very forefront
Hmm.
of really learning what moral injury is, right?
Yeah.
How to treat it. But we do know that, like you said, Maria, putting the human aspect back into the treatment plan
Hmm.
of a client or a patient, right, is the way that we combat this moral injury. To
Hmm.
humanize someone again, to remind them that, their pains or struggles, what they're going through, is first and foremost not um per se something new, right? You're not alone in this. It's
Yeah.
throughout all of humanity, we've kind of known about moral injuries. Just now we're putting a word to it, right? To
Hmm.
these feelings, to these actions. Um, but another thing that I just wanted to clarify to everyone out there, and also to you, Maria, is I can imagine, and that's why I also kind of went into the counseling world or want to go in the counseling world.
Hmm.
I can't imagine navigating those appointments without a medical knowledge. I was on
Yeah.
light limited duty in 2015 as well for 6 months.
Hmm.
And it was, do I go back to fit for full duty or do I go to a medical evaluation board to be
Hmm.
medically retired? But being a Navy corpsman, I knew the right things to say. Now looking back at it, I probably should have been medically retired, in all honesty, right?
Hmm.
Um, but this isn't my story. This is yours. But I remember even in that time frame, how I was left to just manage these appointments,
Yeah.
and even being a corpsman myself, I was like, now I understand the frustration that sailors and Marines have when they feel like they're left out uh, to navigate this on their own. So
Yeah.
I feel your pain on that.
Yeah. Because I can tell you, it's like this was probably, I would say, going into like the early part, or like it was like February to March of like 2015. It was after stuff had happened. It was that whole thing is like, how do I figure this out? Because nobody else is going to figure it out for me. Because I had people that there's always people that care, but it seems like when you say something, your word could be interpreted differently. And throughout those points, that's when I learned it's like I I was like, I need to learn as much as I can about what happened to me, like like emotionally, physically, all of that, and at least understand some of the basic mechanics of like the neurological side of it. And that gave me some knowledge to start going down rabbit holes and just start making those connections towards, just trying to like make some sense of like, how do I get, like, for me, I ended up developing dystonia, which is a neurological movement disorder. And I didn't know what dystonia was then, but just figuring out enough is like, what do I try? Who do I talk to? And the thing is like being down in that part of North Carolina, I was like 2 hours away from like world experts in movement disorders. But because of like how things had like changed, I didn't get those appointments to where they could have been more effective. And it wasn't until what, maybe 5, 6 years ago that I've been getting those appointments, getting that care that I needed to get more stability within my life, like on the medical side. But it's, I think about it now, is like if I would have had that then, I probably wouldn't have some of the issues I have now. And maybe my perspective would have changed. But I can say this, I don't regret the paths that I took because I was protecting myself. And
Right.
I knew I wanted to get through it. And I think that's why I take the perspective and like how I view like the behavioral health side. And like I do a lot of veteran peer support here in North Dakota, because when you have that ability to share like your experiences with another person who just went through some part of the suck, you you just have those connections. Like it was on Friday night, we had a game night for we played one round of Uno for 3.5 hours straight, just giving each other crap, just just sharing that commonality of like we all went through something and just having that connection. To me, like having that, if I would have had that kind of sense of family back when everything was going on, I my viewpoint would be different. I do know that. But I don't think it would have been as influential as it is now, where I'm able to use what I've gone through to help other people when they're navigating stuff. Because like parts of my research, you know, my whole point was to give a speaking platform to other women veterans who may not have had that ability to speak about other stuff that they had gone through. So I did a mixed method study. So I did quantitative and qualitative, which in some ways I wouldn't have changed how I did it because I wanted to have something I could measure, but also understanding what the person part was. And it's like I had the privilege of being able to recruit from like Service Women's Action Network, Women Veterans Alliance, and Women Veterans Network websites. And I had nearly 100 people participate in my study. And just getting a viewpoint on what does your motivation look like through these different sticking points? What was something true to you? Was it not? And I was able to get a measurement of those patterns, what it looks like from perspective point from when you first went into as you're reintegrating different aspects of yourself. Because one of my whole things was like with military transition, we just associated a lot with just getting on the military, but there's different kinds of transitions. You can be doing another contract, you can be PCSing, you can be whatever it is. But it's like when we move beyond that, we get a chance to look at more of the human aspects of it. And I can tell you that with confidence that when I opened my mind more of that with my research, I was able to see those nuances of why those individual components matter. And when I interviewed, 10 women, it was just mind blowing. And I had people who had served from just one enlistment to officers who had been in for over 3 decades. And it's just being able to see those human aspects and how it shaped who they are helped me show like why it's important to put the human aspect back into what things we previously had considered before. Because when we have that element of ourselves during and in like big moving systems like the military, maybe some things won't be as overwhelming or challenging, and just showing that it's okay to say something and not forget that you're a person within this system. And that's what's been my whole thing. And like I told Andrew, I was like, that's why I value putting human experience back in, because when we don't, that's when negative things start happening. Or, for my instance, it was like forgetting, not not understanding fully how I was in those moments, or who I was supposed to be, or who I wanted to be. And that's why it matters. Because at the end of the day, when stuff is done, we're left with ourselves and our own thoughts. And that's what I try to do in my own work back now. Because like I mentioned, I'm pretty sure I am going to be going for another PhD. Maybe it's a punishment mechanism, I don't know. But I've already have clinical training, but being able to have like those other aspects would allow me to go at a higher level to see if there can be some element of putting some human aspect in of like when people are first going through the military, because that could be a fundamental changing point for how people view perspective. It's not changing up what we're doing, but it's just putting an element in that can make some parts better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. There's so many different, I didn't even think about that. So many different aspects of transitioning, not just, being in the service and then transitioning out into civilian life. But like you said,
Mhm.
transition PCSing, people that do lap moves, which are changing your MOS, things
Mhm.
like that. Right. Um, and you talk a lot about research and how you're to me it sounds like you have a great passion for it, and
Yeah.
and Yeah, and the funny thing is when I first got into um my schooling, I was kind of like Doc Barry. I was like, I want to be a clinician. I just want to help patients
Hmm.
out, like or clients. I'll let the really smart people do the research. But it was during my undergrad studies when I really learned what research really is, right? Because that
Hmm.
word gets thrown around so much, especially in today's day and age.
Oh
And
yeah.
then you learn about confirmation biasm, right? And
Hmm.
and how that can skew your research. And
Definitely.
right, especially when right here in your hand, right, you
Yeah.
could type in whatever you want and you're going to have over a million websites that you can go to that can confirm whether it's factual information or not, right? And then,
Hmm.
oh well, I did my research, and you're like, no. When you talk to a real researcher, no, you
Yeah.
didn't, right? um but it's amazing because that's what I found. What you said, you said during your research, it made you focus on what I call the gaps, right? What are we
Yeah.
missing here? Where can we combine, put the dots together, right?
Yeah.
So that way the picture, it reminds me of how you had to connect the dots, one to two, two to three, three to four,
Yeah.
right? That's what it reminds me of, is how do we connect the dots to complete that picture, and
Yeah.
doing that deep research. um and so what is making you decide, or weighing the option of saying, hey, I have one PhD in organizational and industrial psychology, but I'm
Hmm.
thinking about actually going a PhD route, to be a psychologist.
Yeah.
What would, I guess, for not having the right way to ask it, what would be the benefit, like as far as your research or what it is that you're trying to do?
Sure. Like, so going back for another, like, I already have a master's in counseling, so I already know how to ask the questions. I've worked with people from various walks of life, from like kids as young as like 6, 7 years old to people in their 80s and 90s, and getting to see like how people are in their environments and what makes them who they are, and what what maybe they're coming for, and how can it help them at the higher level, like at the psychologist, like clinical psychology level. Having that exposure to like different tools, different resources, different ways of training gives me that last little element that for me, I feel like I need to be able to connect all my experiences, all my training, all the research together into this crazy package of of like who I want to be and how do I want to, make some impact in my world. And go ahead.
And it just dawned something dawned on me. It's
Mhm.
similar, not identical, but similar enough. It's those who go in the it's similar to the idea of those who go into the military and become Mustangs.
Yeah.
They can see both sides of the house. They've
Mhm.
lived both sides of the house. In your situation, you've got now both sides of the house, or
Yeah.
you will, in your arsenal. And as
Yeah.
I told you, what you're going to find is when you get Doc after your name, they cut you more slack, but they expect more out of you. And
Oh,
when you
yeah.
get the second one, based on my experience and mine alone, they're going to look at you like you're fucking crazy.
I already have people who already do that, so that's
Well, I
Ah,
think having those personal experiences as well makes you, in my personal opinion, you know, um, makes you a more compassionate and understanding provider.
Yeah,
You know,
it does.
it allows you to connect with your patient on a deeper level than just
Mhm.
what we might learn, right? Via our research, or via the textbooks, you know what I'm saying? Or via
Mhm.
the clinical hours that you need to get in order to get your licensure, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's one thing that I've learned from Doc Barry, that he tells me all the time. He's like, Luis, he goes, you're already working at that level that I'm at.
Mhm.
He goes, you just need to get through the schooling so that you can
Yeah.
have the official title. Um, but I find that a lot of people that have come to me because I have openly shared my own personal experience with
Yeah.
moral injury, PTSD, uh,
Hmm.
depression, anxiety, and then as well dealing with alcoholism, and then I actually had a suicide attempt on active duty, which is
Hmm.
which, believe it or not, Maria, was even after I went on light limited duty, because when I was on light limited duty, to me it was like no one really gives a shit. Like
Yeah.
the command, like they were trying to send me out to all these other training things. I'm like, wait, time out here. I'm supposed to be here to heal, not to go to all this other training stuff, you know?
Yeah,
And
that's kind of like what happened to me when I was put on to limited duty. It was I was supposed to be able to go to certain appointments or
mhm,
being able to get certain levels of care, but there was still the expectation that I was still able to do my job full time,
right.
which was not possible. And because of those extra stressors, like emotionally and physically, I was gone more days than I should have been. Or
Mhm,
like that's where like that whole morality and like that injury comes from, is because it's like there was too much put onto me, and that expectation is like, oh, you're still this person, you need to do this, and if you're not, you're a piece of shit.
yeah, yeah.
And
Mm.
when you look at it that way, it's like, you know and now I'm able to look back and see that, like, yeah, there were people who just wanted me for like being able to do a job versus valuing me as an individual. And
Mhm,
I'm going to say that's not true of everybody, because there were people that valued me as an individual. But when it's faced with like the military system, it's hard to suss that out. And I think that's where like that drive to have that other set of skills, like at a higher level, to being able to help community, put those elements back in, and maybe,
mhm,
you know, give people more tools in their arsenal to be an individual in a competitive, fast paced, crazy, whatever the heck you want to call it, environment. If you have like those abilities to look back on yourself and say, like, yeah, this is going on, I see this. Because I know in the special ops communities, they're taught to how to think about how they are in a situation, how they should approach it, how they should be at certain levels in the enlisted side. We're not taught that.
mhm,
And if we have some of those other skills of thinking, that could be an element of prevention in itself.
right.
And that could reduce those barriers to people wanting to say, like, hey, this is going on, I may need to do something different, versus saying, like, oh, I can't do this, screw you, go on and do this. And I think that's where some of those other prevention efforts could be more effective, because I'll keep saying it, it's putting the human back into some of the processes. And at the end of the day, I've been able to put the human parts back into myself throughout, gosh, it's been what, 10? Yeah, it's been 10 years since I've been out now.
Mhm,
That it's shaped who I am now and how I view everyday life, and saying, like, I have value and I'm able to share those with others who may need someone to say, like, hey, it's okay to feel human and feel all this stuff, because we don't have enough people saying that.
Right. Right.
oops, absolutely, yeah. You know, one thing that I always heard a lot throughout my time in the service is the green machine, right?
Yeah.
The green machine keeps going. And so that already, that phraseology right there already takes the human aspect out of
Hmm.
the military, right? Because
Yeah.
now you're a machine. And what can you
Hmm.
do with machines? You can switch parts out. If a gear
Yeah.
breaks, you take out that gear, put a new one here. If a sprocket breaks, or whatever it is, a pin, doesn't matter, right? Um, and I'm guilty of even saying this sometimes when I was even younger, or even in leadership position, before I really understood putting the human aspect back into my sailors and Marines. Was, look, you either do your job, or we put you on limited duty, or we process you out, because there's a
Hmm.
hundred other Luis Fonsecas knocking on recruiters' doors to take
Hmm.
my position at any moment. And you hear words like that, a lot of phraseology like that throughout your
Yeah.
military service, right? And you did, I did 22, you did 4, and you're agreeing yourself that, even within those 4 years, you heard that same terminology,
Oh
and it,
yeah.
it strips away the human aspect of
Yeah.
under who wears that uniform.
Yeah, and it's not saying that want to change everything for the aspect of like making things better, but it's putting an element that should be back in there to, people allow a person to be more effective in like a fast-paced environment, emotionally stressing. Like, you know, I feel like that could help you more on the long run when you're trying to look back on things and see like what it is that changed me and how do I want to view it now.
Yeah. Real quick, everyone, for those that are watching, Nate apologizes. He had been having technical issues, uh, and he got dropped from the podcast, and he decided to stay off just so that we gave you all a better experience, and then didn't see him popping in and out. But he is watching, and he'll be asking questions. So I just wanted to clarify that. Doc
The
Barry, what you
common
got?
element, yeah, the common element, what I'm hearing among moral injury, betrayal, as we're talking about here today, and Luis, combat, and you can quote chapter and verse on the common element among those three phenomenon is dehumanization.
Hmm.
Absolute
Yeah.
dehumanization. Man's inhumanity to man, as Nigel would say.
Hmm.
This is Nigel Mumford. He's an Episcopal priest, former Royal Marine, drill instructor, and combat veteran who served during the Troubles. He's been on with us twice. Nigel is a force of nature, and that's something he and I text each other about all the time is
Hmm.
man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah, and I think you bring up so many good points. Is like, yeah, there's elements of like where you need to learn how to be effective in different
Mhm.
environments. But if we can have those elements of who we are to be in that environment, we'd be better off.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
not asking for significant change, it's just putting in something that could make a person more.
yeah. And I think that's what true resilience is,
Hmm.
right? I think a lot of people, once again, my personal opinion, um, especially in the military, think that resilience is just being able to take a punch to the face and stand back up and keep going. Eventually, you're not going to stand up one day. So building true resilience is giving people the tools, the proper tools to
Hmm.
to dodge that punch, to block that punch, to
Hmm.
combat that punch, right? And I think that's what we're talking about when we talk
Yeah.
about putting the human aspect back in, is giving people the proper tools to build what I like to call a true resilient mindset. Vice just suck it the fuck up, buttercup.
Yeah, it's like we can still have those elements, but like when we put back in those traits, then we can see a picture more wholly. Like, like you talked about, like the Mustang mentality of somebody who's like say they went and enlisted and they're becoming an officer and being able to see all the sides of the picture. Like I talk about that in my research, and it was putting like that duality of like there could be a situation that's positive and it can also be something emotionally straining and just completely negative, or like where it shifts like what you value and who you are. When we talk, if we have more conversations about that within those environments where like lives are on the line or different situations that it may be, we'd be better off. And it's like I said, it's not literally asking people to significantly change. It's just about, that's where I talk about reintegration, is reintegrating those human elements back into a process to where a person could be more effective in their personal and professional lives, so that when you're coming to some significant transition, let's just say for all shits and giggles, it is getting out of the military. When you're able to have those individual traits, it can make that process of going back into like everyday life a little bit less painful. Because one of my side things that I do on top of everything else is veteran peer support. And I live right near an Air Force base, so I see people getting out all the time. And on Friday, I just saw people who are one person who's trying to navigate going through like a med board situation and trying to like figure out what life is going to look like. And that's where I've seen it's like if people understand some of those traits, it makes those processes a bit less overwhelming. And that kind of leads into another thing I've been doing. Yeah, I do a lot of a lot of stuff. A good friend of mine, Carlos Rodriguez, he's an Air Force vet, Operation Iraqi Freedom vet. Him and I built a transition assistance program called Operation Civilian Readiness. It basically takes those elements of what you may learn in like the TAPS program, but makes it more of a human process where it's like for veterans by veterans, to show that it's okay to have all those elements, and just that's literally what it is putting back the human aspect into making some significant change. And what we've found, like through the vets that we talk with, is when they get a chance to be able to talk about themselves or just talk about what they're going through, it helps. And I've seen people who've come in where they've been on the brink of like, do I want to be on this earth or do I not want to be? And just having that ability to speak about who they are, what's going on, and what may be troubling them, that can be that one element to keep them here for another day and another week and another month. And I've seen that transformative from like a clinical setting and also in the community setting. So that's where I really try to value like that human experience. And I think that's where Andrew and I really connected at the APA conference is like putting that human element. And I'm not like I said then, I am not a typical IO psychologist by any means, because I look at the human aspect rather than just like a metric.
So Doc, and I'm talking to you, Maria.
Yeah.
Explain to me that way our audience as well knows. Just because what exactly is an IO? Like, what is y'all's main focus?
Yeah, like for industrial and organizational psychology, it's looking at the human, like looking at basically how a human can operate in like, like big structures. Like it'd be like corporate America. It can be, small businesses, large businesses. For me, it was looking at the systems of the military, but I'm also a clinician, so that's why I'm not typical. And when you're able to see those human aspects and those processes, like for a lot of typical IO psychologists, you're able to make a better informed decision that allows processes to run more smoothly, and also put in that human aspect back into processes where it may have been removed. And for me, I guess you could say, like for the IO perspective, like I was looking at how to put the human aspect back into processes within the military. But I'm looking at it from a behavioral standpoint, from the clinical side, and also those systems. So I think I've got the best of both worlds. And also the other element is the individual stories and experiences, because that's what it's about at the end of the day, is how are we affected, and how can we make it better for the next person, or even potentially make it a little bit better for ourselves.
Absolutely, yep.
So it's like, I guess it's like that passion is fueled because of what I went through, and wanting to make it better for other people. And I can say that with confidence with people that I get to talk with every day.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's whether it's a random Uno game that lasts 3.5 hours, or if it's something just somebody's wanting to talk about what's going on in their work, or
Yeah.
just how they may feel about it. I feel like when we do that, we're doing a better service for those who are looking for that.
It's kind of like I've always heard throughout my Navy careers, leave it better than how you found it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what I'm hearing from you, is that
Yeah.
you're what you experience, you want it better for the next one, and
Yeah.
and that's what drives me too, and that's why, even though I had a long Navy career and I did quite a few deployments. I ended up deploying 8 times.
Hmm.
Like, I'm one of the biggest advocates for, like, not going to fucking war. Like, sending our young men and women to conflicts that I and I'm not a politician. I've never sat at those high levels to make those big decisions. Um, but I also think that sending our young men and women to those situations, for me, is almost kind of like should be a last resort, because you see how damaging and what really, when we say the cost of war, the cost of conflict really comes down to, right, is that
Hmm.
individual person.
Yeah.
Because you're right. One thing that I've learned through my schooling is each individual has their own reality of this world, and I can't make what I think my reality of this world to be true to you. You have to create that for yourself. I can
Yeah.
guide you and give you the tools, right, to make a hopefully um, a better version of ourselves, right? But yeah, go ahead, Doc.
Not just the damage to the individual veteran. The damage oftentimes is cross generational. In other words, they bring the war home with them, and it affects their
Hmm.
marriages, their kids, their
Hmm.
family, and so on and so forth. A guy we had on a while back, his dad served during the Korean War at the Chosin Reservoir, and
Mm.
he said out loud in that webcast, as well as to me in private, I've known him 25, 30 years. He said, I felt like I was going through the Korean War with my father when he came home. That
Mm.
really epitomizes cross generational trauma right there.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point is when we're put through like those significant experiences that fundamentally change who we are, when that conflict, whatever it may be, is done, we're still affected by it when we come home. And you know we're affecting those who are around us, we're affecting our environments, our sociality, our behaviors, whatever it might be. And we don't, a lot of times people don't always see like how that's being affected around them. And that's where I know, like, even through my own experiences, even though I never deployed, that I know I was affected by what happened to me. And I can say that it affected my family after I moved back, because at times they didn't know how to sometimes talk to me with,
Hmm.
because I was very guarded. I was very selective of what I was saying, and I wasn't open to like some of the fundamental parts until a few years ago, that I was I could come off like being mean or angry when truth told is that I'm not an angry person. But
Right.
it was what I went through, that like what happened to me, it was being expressed out through who I am. And after like being able to get the opportunities to speak about those elements and like literally peeling back the onion, that's what happens like through therapy, whatever modality it may be, that when we start peeling that back, we're better able to look at those fundamental layers and see for what it was, and like how can we reinterpret that in a way that maybe it's not impact, maybe reinterpret it into a way that we're able to distill it into different ways that maybe those around us or who what we're around aren't affected as in those ways as they may have been when not too long after that change.
Yeah. Nate put on the chat. He said, "I would love to see someone with an IO background hired into federal service to advocate for veterans with service-related impairments. Implement the information supplied by the job accommodation." I can't. I don't know why I can't read the rest of it. But yeah,
Mm.
absolutely, Nate. You're right.
Yeah.
Um, Maria, if I may ask you on
Sure.
your professional opinion about this,
Hmm.
why do you think that, especially in the military, that's all I did from as my adult, as being an adult, and then I went to school after I retired from the Navy. Why do you think it's so prevalent for us to, in the military, continue perpetuating that? Well, that's how I had to deal with it. So you're gonna have to go through the same shit as well too, instead of trying to improve the process.
I think in those environments is like when a person has been through part of that, they may not be able to see that maybe there's a different way to look at it. And I know through I'm just trying to think, even like I can say from my one uncle who served as a door gunner in the army during like some of the big conflicts in Vietnam, that he was very guarded and reserved with what he said because he didn't want people to experience some stuff that he had gone through. And I think like that, going back to what you said, is like you just have to go through it to understand it, which I think, yeah, there is an element of truth. There's like there are parts of it where you have to go through a process and able to understand it a little bit better. But if you can go about it from a different perspective or like a broader perspective, you may better able to look at all those elements that are contributing to that mindset or like that perspective, or like how something is being shaped, like for the sake of it, like through military service, like why is an order the way it is. But if like we can have like a just that other element, like I've been saying for like the last hour and a half, that that person part into it, we may be able to see those aspects that we're missing and may make it just a little bit better. And when we talk about some of those bigger changes, it doesn't happen overnight. But if we have those people in those right positions, we may be better able to start those processes to making it better, not necessarily changing everything, but growing a mindset that's more open to different elements, that we may be better able to look at difficult experiences, or look at like my situation, look at somebody who went through a med board, not knowing how to navigate life, and just saying like, hey, I hear you, and you're going to experience this or not, and it's all right, and we're here for you. Because if we don't have that, we're doing a disservice. And like kind of going back to what Nate put in the chat about for like advocating for service related impairments to like job accommodations, I think that could be, when we have a person who understands those elements, they're going to think about those things that somebody who didn't go through it, that a person may need. Like for me, like surviving a PhD, I worked with a vocational program here in North Dakota to get the elements that I needed to be successful. So it's like I can adjust my monitors, I can change my laptop, I can do everything. I can even change the lighting in here to if I wanted to change the mood in a way. If I wanted it to be green, I could. Or if I wanted it to be purple, whatever it may be, it's whatever flavor of crayon that may come up that day. But
Yeah.
but to kind of go back to the whole picture, like when we understand a bit more about it, we can make change, because there are people who want to make changes. Sometimes they just don't know how to look at it.
Absolutely. Well, it
And-
definitely does sound like while you were going through your light duty process and then med board, that like you said, that major the master chiefs were some of those individuals that
oh yeah,
understood, like, you know what, like this doesn't have to be a hard process. Like I have in the little bit of control and power that I have, right? I'm gonna
hmm,
make it better for, at least for you. It sounded like, Maria, and hopefully,
yeah,
well, like I said, I've known Kevin for a very long time, and I know he's been like I said, he's definitely one of those people that tries to make the Navy much better than how he found it.
yeah. And I I definitely knew that more like once I was part more of like that, the RAGE program, that's what it was called, where you could like go to different like medical elements within the hospital. Like once I just open more about my experiences, it's like I was able to understand what he meant, as far as like, wanting to make it better, and show like, it's like you said, it doesn't have to be as hard as some people are making it. Because some of the forces that made that, when I went through my stuff, it seemed like everybody was throwing that and the kitchen sink at it to make either stuff slow or stop.
Yeah.
I was just reading what Nate also put in. It says neither supervisors nor veterans have enough info to understand how their impairments affect. Yeah, you're right, Nate. Is like they don't always have and they don't have enough there that information about the impairments or executive functions because a lot of times some people haven't wanted to explore all those elements because sometimes we're forced to we're made to think one way, but if we just open our minds slightly, that can take us onto a journey that, we start seeing that whole picture. I know it has for me when I opened up my perspective, and it's led me to, sitting down with you all here tonight
Yeah.
and
And
sharing parts of my story that I thought I never would.
well, we appreciate it very
Yeah.
much. So, and it's to give testimony as well to Nate. Um, so I use what is typically known as VRNE, which is
Mhm.
Chapter 31 for my schooling, and I was initially denied to go to the psychology route by the first counselor I got, which for all of y'all that for our audience that don't know, in order to be a vocational rehabilitation and employment counselor, that is a master's level counseling program. So you'd expect that a counselor would understand somebody that wants to go into the counseling world. Where my first counselor said, denied it. She's like, "Oh no, you have a 70% rating for just PTSD alone." She's like, how can you be an effective clinician, an effective psychologist?" And I'm sitting here, I'm like, "But you took one aspect of my life and didn't review the last 8 years that I have of sobriety,
Mhm.
of working on myself, that I can
Yeah.
bring to the table, and then I was very fortunate that I dropped that counselor, and then a new counselor picked me up, and she was the one that said, no, Luis, whatever that other counselor said, I disagree with. I think people like you make the best counselors because,
Yeah.
like we said, we can connect with our clientele that we specifically
Mhm.
want to work with, right? And I specifically do want to work with active duty members and or veterans. Not saying I would not work with children or geriatric or
Yeah.
civilian population. I understand I have to get hours somewhere, right? But my main goal, my main focus is to give back to the community that I was in for such a long time. So
Yeah. And I can like talking about like those different parts of community, like through my doctoral research, m- some people, like a couple of the people that I interviewed, you know, the military had been such a part of their life since like 17, 18 years old. And ones that had been in for, let's just say over 20 years, you know, with one, or with them, they didn't know like what life was like differently without that structure, without that system. And it's like having somebody like just like look at those different traits when you have somebody who says like, yeah, I want to understand you, like let's look at it, that can be that one element to like, just opens up like having a better clinician or whoever it may be saying like, yeah, some of these parts just suck. And like what you've gone through is valid, and like with you're able to connect the human parts of yourself to who you want to serve, you'd make a freaking fantabulous clinician, provider, psychologist, whoever it may be. I know like when I first started my master's, it's like I had difficulty connecting some of those parts of myself because I was still trying to figure out my health. But I can say now that I have thankfully have the care that I've needed, I'm able to connect those elements that I wasn't able to use at that point to be able to, hopefully spark a little bit of, you know, interest or maybe a little element of change to how people view themselves in their environments. And I think that's still continuing like inspiration today because I had those people who helped me and I want to keep
yeah,
helping them.
and I think that's why it's so important for us to share our stories
Hmm.
because just even you sharing your story, um, and it's been so it's like Doc Bear, got his doctorate, 20 years ago, right? You're kind of just finished that journey, right?
Yeah.
You just finished it, and you still so openly talk about trying to count over there, doc, 30, 40 years, 50 years. But you openly
27,
talk.
27 years for the first one, and the second one I got in 2007. So
Yeah.
I'm just doing the arithmetic here. Is it any
But
goddamn wonder I no longer have hair? I mean, really.
yeah, but Maria, what I really enjoyed about listening to your story, um, because we're kind of coming towards the end,
Mhm.
is how you have openly also discussed like I've gone to treatment myself. If it wasn't for that, because sometimes, and maybe you can understand this, Maria. Doc Barry's heard me talk about this because he's one of my mentors. Is sometimes I feel like, how am I supposed to help people when sometimes like I feel like I can't even help myself. I don't have my shit together. But listening
Mhm.
to your story reminds me like there's a reason why they require us to have so many hours of our
Mhm.
own individual counseling while we're going through school. And then there's another reason why I've heard through schooling and through Doc Barry that a good clinician, a good counselor usually has their own counselor as well. You
Yeah.
know, and it shows that we're all human beings, and we're not
Yeah.
impervious just because we have the knowledge. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I really, you hit all those points so well. And I think one of the things like is like also think it's okay to not have your shit all together because that goes back to like who we are. Because there are days that, oh gosh, I feel like it's a disaster, but I think that's where people can really relate is when, we're not all going to have everything together every single day. But if there's some of those elements where we can connect together, that's where that creates those more effective like clinical environments or like between clinical and peer or just day-to-day stuff that can like spark that element of like I'm able to connect to you more humanly and more openly. Because I know in some of my clinical training, some of it was so very by the book because there's so much to learn in a short amount of time that
Mhm.
I had to unlearn some of that stuff and like put some of those little bits of human part back into it, and that allowed me to be more effective in my clinical judgment. And it's especially grown now since I've worked with veterans on the peer side, where I've really used my own experiences to connect and like
Mhm.
help spark those connections and and just that community. Because where I'm at, it's well, yeah, it is rural, but when there's those elements that can affect your ability to connect, and if you're not aware to that, it can be hard to, to mesh and just understand a person for who they are and what they may be. And I know it's like when I've able to connect with the veterans that I've gotten to know, and I have the privilege to call friends, that we can rely on each other for different little elements. If it's like if somebody just wants to whip out a corny joke or just like we have a whole WhatsApp chat and just talking about just whatever it may be. But when we're aware to those of like who we are, that does make us more effective in our our daily and personal and professional lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it reminds me what you were just saying as well too is I had failed one of my exams, and I was so distraught about it because it was like, all of those negative intrusive thoughts start coming in. See, Luis, it
Hmm.
was just a matter of time before you screwed this up, and everyone noticed that you're not smart enough to do this. And um and I don't know what it was, but something told me like, let's make a quick little short, Instagram video about this. And I
Hmm.
did. And I said, man, I just failed my first exam. Doc Barry hit me up. And then I had other friends that are also doctors in psychology or psychiatrists.
Hmm.
And they were like, I had so many messages come in like, do you know how many fucking exams I failed throughout school? Like they're like, do not let this define you. Don't
Hmm.
beat yourself up over this. It's okay to fail.
Yeah.
And I had to learn that. I had to learn that first it's okay to fail. Secondly, it's also okay to question your professor. Like, hey, look,
Hmm.
I'm not questioning the grading, but what I am questioning is X, Y, and Z in order for me to become a better student, in order to become the best clinician that I can be. So your
Mhm.
story reminds me so much of that. And that's why I love hearing other people's stories as well too, because it reminds me that although we're all individual people, we all have some of the same common struggles and
Yeah.
adversities in life, right? And just because I don't have it figured out doesn't mean that there's somebody out there that hasn't already figured it out. What's up, Doc?
Well, as far as failure goes, Nate and Luis know full well I also have failed many times throughout my life, and I've also been on the receiving end of so-called experts telling me what I should and should not do with my life, and so on and so forth. Folks, listen, you're talking to a guy who's failed Psych 101 2 times and then finally got a sort of an okay grade on the third. You're also talking to a silly schmuck who, according to the GRE scores, I have no business shoveling refuse out of public lavatories, and yet I'm a Harvard grad and I have 2 doctorates. Okay. Also, another thing is people get in their minds that higher GPA automatically correlates with how good a clinician they're going to be. Bullshit, I say. Because what goes on in a classroom versus how well you connect with people, oh man, those are 2 completely different chickens, and don't let anybody tell you
Agreed.
otherwise. For
Yeah.
God's sakes.
Yeah, because it's like an environment of going from like a controlled environment to going to uncontrolled to not knowing like what's going to pop up in front of you.
Hmm.
Hello.
Yeah. So, with that being said, Amir, we have about 10 minutes left, so
Yeah.
we like to leave the 10 minutes for any last thoughts that you might have that you were wanting to share with the audience.
Oh gosh. I would say it's like one of the first things is, you know, don't like kind of like what you were just saying a little bit ago that it's okay to fail because you you never know where it's going to lead you. Like I failed to keep my contract as a musician and it led me down to a path of yes, my life changing fundamentally, but also into a way that it's allowed me to develop a broader and more open community than I would have ever thought possible. So it's like having just being open to all those elements to where if something doesn't go your way, to being like, okay, how do I use this to, make where I want to go where I want to go, you know, and understanding like, oh, this is the part that sucked. Like, let me change this little element a little bit to see if I approach it a little bit differently, it's going to make me go that way I want to go. And you still may not go that way. You may go in a totally opposite direction. And I can tell you from that, my own parts, my life did go in the opposite direction. But, you know, I'm able to be more, I feel like, just more present and passionate about what I want to do because yeah, I want it to be I am successful, but I feel like I've gotten to be more successful with the opportunities to, to talk and just connect through, shared stories and experiences because that's where some like those real magical elements can happen. And I can, shoot, I'm at Andrew Doc Berry at APA where I thought I was just going to be going and presenting a poster of my research, and it's turned into now a new friendship, and having the privilege to getting to come and speak and share like who I am and like what made me be that. It's being open to those little elements because you never know which way you're going to go. And honestly, I feel, I'm so incredibly thankful. Did what happened to me suck? Oh, absolutely. It fucking sucked. but but having those people that helped even today that helped shape who I am, I feel that much richer in life. And that's that's one of those things that's inspiring me to wanting to get those other little elements of like clinical training so that I can hopefully be at those higher levels to make a change that helps at least one person. Because if I do that, then I've done my job. Even
Yeah.
if it looks weird and ugly.
Right. Yeah. It's you this has been wonderful because when you talked
Yes.
about, failure can absolutely change the trajectory of your life.
Mhm.
I spoke earlier in this podcast about, I had a suicide attempt on active duty. So I failed to even kill myself, right? And if it wasn't because of that, I wouldn't be here today, sitting here wanting to do what you and Dr. Barry do, which
Mhm.
is to give back to humanity and to those that are hurting inside, that are suffering. And I'm very grateful now that that has been my biggest failure in life is taking myself out of the equation. So thank you for reminding me about that. And
Yeah.
what was it? They say Thomas Edison had like over 1,000 tries to fix the filament of the light bulb, right? Before he finally got it right.
Yeah.
And it was that one time when he got it right that he's remembered. So
Yeah. I think of the rest of the quote went is like then he went on to say it's like he figured out so many ways of not how to do it. And it
yeah.
was just like he just needed like the one way, to like literally brighten up the world. And it kind of goes back to like all of our own experiences. It takes that one thing to shape and change who we are and how we view ourselves. And that's right. That's why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing and like what I want to keep moving forward. Because if I hadn't had some of the people in my life, I can honestly say I wouldn't be doing this or I wouldn't be here.
That's
Right.
right.
And now that I've, making all these new connections like here tonight, I'm, that gives enough fuel to my fire to, keep doing it day after day, even if it's just something small,
Yeah.
that it just makes it that much richer.
Yeah.
There was an
Doctor.
American humorist. There's an American humorist before your time. You've never heard his name before. Bennett Cerf, CERF, who is credited for saying, "Genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration."
Yeah.
Boy,
Yeah.
was he right about that. This is the guy who can see something different, see the end result. But between that discovery and when it comes to realization and fruition, oh my God,
Hmm.
there's all kinds of heartache and hell.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I I know like from like being like literally getting out as a marine, like getting out as like a broke marine, like literally like medically broke, to being having a PhD, like, and having all those elements thrown against me like during this whole process. I wouldn't change it. I just, you know I discovered so much, and like, that's where that, like I said, that's where that passion and inspiration come from, is the perspiration of out of like all the frustration. And that's where I, want to keep that momentum going, because it's, to me, it's just like it's enough that fuel, like even despite being like crazily tired, that it allows us to be, that much more successful.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Oh yeah,
Thank you.
oh yeah.
Well, do we have any last minute thoughts before we wrap things up for the evening?
Briefly, yeah. If you like doing this, Maria, come back and do it again anytime. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, before you close your browser, make sure that you're 100% uploaded. What I'm seeing here for me is 99%. I don't know what you guys are seeing.
Mm.
Hopefully, even though Nate got flushed, thanks to this perfect technology that we believe in, that this will be uploaded nonetheless, because this has been extraordinary. The other
Yes.
Yeah.
thing is, if Maria, if you're okay with it, I can give your contact info to Luis so that
Oh,
he can collaborate with somebody else as he too
absolutely.
fights his way through the snarls of graduate school, et cetera, et
Oh,
cetera.
absolutely.
Well, Dr. Mollenhauer, I truly, truly appreciate that. I've
Thank
learned not
you.
just through my Navy career, but especially now, towards the end of undergrad, they emphasize so much about mentorship, um, and you're not. They said yes, you can make it to the program without any mentors, but you need mentors not just within the academic
Hmm.
environment that you're in, but outside of it as well. So so I would really love to keep in contact with you.
Oh,
I think the research
absolutely.
that you're doing, I think you and I could collaborate on, not collaborate, but pick each other's brain a little bit. I know I would
Yeah.
love to pick your brain some more, um
Yeah.
about especially your thoughts on moral injury and
Yeah.
how from an IO perspective, we could help change organizations to be more effective and better leaders in
Yeah.
order for our service members that come home, whether you deploy or not doesn't matter, right? It's still a
Yeah.
sacrifice while you're in service, so that when they can come home, they can integrate back with their families, right?
Hmm.
And coming home could just be coming home from a long day's worth of work, you know.
Exactly.
So thank you for that, Dr.
Yeah.
Mollenauer. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Luis. Thanks, Andrew. It's been an absolute pressure. Not pressure, pleasure. Gosh, speaking for speaking for lots of words. Gosh, like get talking so long, it's like, oh, that word slipped out of my mouth. But yeah,
Mhm.
no, I've absolutely enjoyed this for a Sunday evening. I know it's going to lead me into this next week with that
Good,
much more energy.
good, good, good.
Amen.
Well, with that, yeah. Well, with that being said, I don't think we can sign off any better than that. If you liked what you watched this evening, please like, subscribe, and share our stories. And if I'm not saying if you have, tongue tied tonight, but everyone has a story, and everyone's story is
Agree.
very important. So if you want to share
Mm.
your story, please contact us, and we'll get you put on the schedule. And with that, everyone, please have a great rest of your evening.